Three, two, one. Let's go. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Artist Data Science Happy Hour. It is Friday, November 12th. Wherever you are, I hope you guys are doing well, staying warm. Here in Winnipeg, we got literally 3 feet of snow outside. It is madness. I had the craziest blizzard I've seen in like 3 years over the last couple of days. It's officially the holiday season, I guess. That's kind of rings in the holiday season for me. Personally, I don't mind the snow as long as I don't got to go outside or do anything in it. As long as I'm sitting by the window having a nice beverage, I'm good. But hopefully it's nice and warm wherever you guys are. Also, I hope you guys got a chance to tune into the episode I released today with a good friend of mine, the one and only George Firakan. We talked about how to turn the lights on data. So we had a great conversation all about data governance and a bunch of cool stuff from his course. Hopefully you get a chance to tune in. Just what's coming up in a couple of weeks. I've got over the next couple of weeks, I've got Steve Cardinale, turning ideas into gold. Then Karush Alizada. We're going to be talking about NLP and philosophy. He's got the philosophy data project, so that's pretty cool. Hopefully, you guys have been enjoying the Medium publications that I've just been dropping all week for you guys. Definitely let me know what you guys have been thinking of those written pieces. If you enjoy them, let me know. If you don't enjoy them, let me know. Shout out to everybody in the room. What's up, Vin, Serge, Eric, Mark, Matt, Jennifer. It's been so long, Jennifer. I haven't seen you in a very long time. And Russell as well. If you guys got questions on anything whatsoever, please go ahead and drop it right there in the chat. I will be happy to take your questions. Also, big thanks to Avery for taking over last week, doing the MC duties for me. I really appreciate that, Avery. Thank you very much. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed hanging out with Avery. So yeah, man, let's go. Let's get it going. So, I guess I released a piece today called the data science mindset. So, well, it wasn't called the data science mindset. It says you might know data science, but you don't think like a data scientist. And the whole piece was kind of me laying out the data science mindset, which I said is like this 3-piece thing: engineer, business person, and scientist. So I'm wondering, what does it mean to you to think like a data scientist? What does it mean to you to think like a data scientist? Let's kick it off with Serge, and let's go to Vin as well. Also, big congratulations to Mark as well. Yeah, I've definitely got to shout that out. Mark got promoted to senior data scientist up at Humu. So huge round of applause for our friend Mark, man. That's amazing. So we'll get to Mark on some pointers on what it took to level up like that. I'd love to get into that. Let's start the conversation first. With this opening question, what does it mean to think like a data scientist? Then we'll get into the question here from Matt Diamond talking about Jupyter notebooks to non-technical users. Then we'll move into some questions for Mark. Let's kick it off, Serge. Go for it.
Hi. I think there is no data science without science. I think that's probably, to me, like the key differentiator between being a data analyst and a data scientist. I mean, data analysts could have engineering skills and know a lot about the business, but a data science must be a skeptic. In other words, not trust the data, not even trust the intentions behind the data or the data generation process. Use, I think, interpretation, experimentation, statistics are all very important in disentangling all the different things that come to make the data and what the data represents in the real world. And so I basically think, although it's very valid to see it as a Venn diagram where you have all these different things that are needed, I think that's a differentiator in data science.
Walk us through that real quick at just like a high level. What does it mean to run an experiment in machine learning? Does that simply mean, okay, I've got a problem statement, I've got data, I've got a suite of candidate algorithms that I wish to test on this data, and I want to put forth this hypothesis that I could actually model this data generating process, and here are my different models, and do I compare whether I get a good MSc or not get MSc? You know what I mean? Like, what does that look like in data science?
Well, it's not even it's even before it gets to the modeling process. You can do that through modeling. Sometimes there's things you don't understand, and you don't understand them until you model them. And sometimes through unsupervised methods, you can learn a lot of things as well. In my work with weather data, I find sometimes through clusters, I find, okay, well, this whoever put this data here, it doesn't belong here. There must be because it's just so far off everything else. You know, there's no way like the plant would have been planted here. The crop would have, you know, things like that. I tend to find that way. But if I were just trusting the data and just running it as you know anything, I would end up with a certain percentage that would be poor quality simply because of that. And so
Mhm.
I have to put the science first and try to run some scenarios. And sometimes I don't even know what those hypotheses are till I explore the data enough. Or maybe if I didn't explore it enough, I go through the modeling exercise and I realize I have poor results, and then I have to trace it back, to what misclassified and why.
Serge, thank you very much. Hopefully, you guys took a lot out of that. That's one that you might want to run back on repeat. Serge, thank you. Actually, let's go to before I get to Vin, let's go to Vivian on this. Vivian, I don't know if you heard the opening question, but I'm gonna repeat it for you. It is, what does it mean to think like a data scientist? This is coming on the heels of a blog post that published today, which was so you know about data science, but you don't think like a data scientist. So I'm just curious, what does it mean to you to think like a data scientist?
Now I wish that I'd read that blog post already. I got the notification on my phone actually to read it,
Oh,
but I haven't read it yet. So now I wish I
oh,
had.
got you.
Um, can I not go next? I
Yeah,
feel like I
yeah.
need to think about this actually.
Yeah, yeah, no worries. Let's go to Vin and then uh after Vin, maybe Eric, and then we'll go to Vivian. Then we'll go to Mark because I like this twist that Eric had put on the question. What does it mean to think like a senior data scientist? I think that is what I want to ask Mark. So let's go to Vin, Eric, Vivian, then Mark.
Thinking like a data scientist means a lot of different stuff now, because every different domain has like a different flavor of data science. It feels like we all do a lot of the same stuff. We all use some of the same core tools, but thinking like a data scientist now means understanding your domain. And I think we forget that in a lot of cases, that the domain knowledge that other people have around you, the subject matter experts, those people help you think like a data scientist who can build something for that part of the business or for that particular use case. And so I think Serge just killed it. So I got like literally nothing else to talk about from from a traditionalist data scientist standpoint. But I think the one thing we often overlook is thinking like a domain expert, thinking like a customer or a business owner or some stakeholder or senior leader whose job's on the line. I mean, just there's so many different pairs of shoes you can put yourself in to understand the little things that they're not telling you about the project, but to figure out what questions maybe you could ask or how you use all the tools that you have to build something that meets a need and oftentimes meets multiple needs. So that's, I think, thinking like a data scientist now, especially as we start supporting different parts of the business and more complex use cases, and we're starting to touch customers. I think it means thinking not just like ourselves, but walking outside of the machine learning team.
Vin, thank you very much. Let's go to Eric, and then uh, after Eric, we'll go Vivian, then Mark.
Yeah, I think my answer is probably going to be supremely unsatisfying. It's unsatisfying to me too. So I'm like trying to think about it. I'm like, okay, what do I do that's different from like say the people around me? And one of the things I thought of was like, well, we'll just like ask an absurd number of questions, and like I'm like, well, that's good. And I think, well, actually, like I have a GM who asks me all the questions I haven't thought of yet, and it drives me nuts because I didn't think of that question. So I'm like, maybe it's not just questions, or maybe it's the tools that I use or something. But like, what does it mean to think like a data scientist? Doesn't mean to like just use a tool, that other people don't use. And so as I'm like trying to compare myself to people around me who don't do what I do to figure out what the difference is. And really like just the main thing I keep just coming back to is like we all try and think similarly. We all try and think about problems and break them down into little pieces and how's it going to affect the customers or the bottom line or whatever. And really, because every organization is so different, I think that thinking like a data scientist means like all those things, but just knowing how to apply them to the tools that you have that the person who works on the product team doesn't have. Just like they know how to apply their tools in a way that I don't know how to do, and I'm not going to learn how to do. So I think it's really organizational specific.
Eric, thanks so much. Let's go to Vivian.
Something that I was thinking about that is sort of unique about my role compared to the other people around me is that I feel like I'm sort of a connector between some other roles, like the product manager and like the data engineer or something like that. Like I'm the person that sort of like can connect all these people together. You know, the product manager really wants to like use data, but doesn't have the right know-how to dig into it. The data engineer has like really, you know, specific expertise of how to like get the data pipeline up and going and everything. And then I feel like I kind of like am the connector piece of like how to actually like get this data and then like make it meaningful for a product kind of thing. Yeah, so that's what I thought of just when everybody was talking. I agree with everybody else though, but that was kind of like the piece I wanted to add.
Thank you, Vivian. And Vivian, can you talk to us about the metaverse at some point in the conversation? Because I'd like to know what Facebook has planned for that.
Okay, I don't know what Facebook has planned for that. I feel like.
Okay. Let's go to Mark. Mark, wait, yeah. Let's first go to Mark about what it means to think like a senior data scientist.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for the shout out too. I really appreciate that. And well, first I want to answer like what I think the main thing that came to mind when like thinking like a data scientist that I think hasn't been mentioned yet, but the role of trust as like your main social currency within an organization. And I've actually, one of my first data science roles, I accidentally presented like completely wrong numbers and I lost the trust of a lot of stakeholders. And it took me months to build that back up. And so like, everyone wants to be trusted, but like as a data professional, like how can you create processes and like define your like assumptions and test those out? So even if you are wrong, it's like, well, I documented this process and like, this is how we got to that. And this is how we're going to fix it. Right. But for the most part, you should get like right answers for things, but we're dealing with a lot of ambiguity. And so that sting really stuck with me of like, all right, how do I create processes so that I trust my results and I can share that trust with others? So like once I get that down, so going to the next stage is like, how do I think like a senior data scientist? And I think the main thing for that is, you move away from like project focus to like business focus as a whole. And so you start thinking like, how does your work fit within the entire org and drive the needle forward? And specifically, it's like you can do so much as a data scientist is what do you choose that's gonna be most impactful? But then another piece that took me a while to pick up was what's the right time to engage in this? Because there's, especially in a startup, there's so many things to reprioritize. So like learning how to prioritize what's the correct thing to engage on was really critical for that. And then from there, it's one thing to say like, I have this idea and this is the right time to do it, but then be able to execute on it. So, non-senior data science, they may bring this idea to a manager and the manager may be able to like pick up like, hey, here's all these pieces. Let me bring this all together. There you go. Here's this project. But as a senior data scientist, I'm the one going out and building out those relationships. I'm selling this idea and getting buy-in. And I'm more so looping in my managers to know the progress. And so they can step in just in case they're like, hey, actually, there's this like change in the business here, right? And so combining that ability to identify like, where are the key business things that are moving forward? What's the right timing for it? And then to be able to execute and get the people around you to deliver on it. Pretty not self-motivated, but basically push forward, execute it, and driven by yourself. you're definitely gonna collaborate with a lot of people, but like taking lead on that project, I think that's the key kind of differentiator for me that I've noticed between when I first started as data science to like my work now. And big shout out to Vince, data. I mention it all the time, but his workshop was really good because the figuring out what to work on was like, that's what I learned through that workshop.
Yeah, that was a great workshop. I was in that same session with you, Mark. Vin, whenever you are doing that next time, please do let us know. I'll be sure to link out to that. It is well worth your time if you're trying to get to that next level in your career. Mark, when I want to talk real quick about that instance you talked about where you kind of lost trust by presenting the wrong numbers. Like, what is the process look like? First of all, you present the wrong numbers, it probably feels shitty. How did you personally how did you respond to that? How did you take that? And then what was like the process to gain the trust back from your colleagues?
Oh man, that was a rough time. that definitely sucked. To give context, I was working with ophthalmology data, so eyes. And essentially, you're trying to get user counts of people who present this disease. But something that's a weird quirk with ophthalmology data is like, is it the left eye or the right eye? So that completely messes up your counts because it can either be one eye, two eyes, or one other eye. And so I didn't account for that because this is new domain for me, and all my numbers are wrong, right? And so it was for a major client, and the salesperson presented it for a large contract, and you live and learn. But essentially, the way I built that back up was I got really on it for my analysis plans and really saying like, okay, I'm actually forget trying to go straight into coding because I was like fast paced, let me move as quickly as possible, taking a step back and like really like thinking through like, this is how I'm going to solve this, and then going to the stakeholder and be like, this is my thought process, and this point here, and here, I can see your domain expertise being really helpful. Do you think my assumptions are great here? And by documenting that and then also getting buy-in from the stakeholder and the requester, that instantly builds in a lot of trust for that. And so kind of repeating that process. And so it went from like, oh yeah, wow, Mark totally messed up that eye count thing, to slowly shifting towards like, oh wow, Mark's really thorough, and Mark really brought me along this journey to see like how he got those numbers for us. And so that was a long process. But here's the thing, I didn't win everyone back. There are some people who are like, oh yeah, Mark's great. Other people are like, they were stuck with that impression of me for a while.
Mm-hmm. So when you kind of think back to that now, like if there's like one bit of advice that you can give the Mark of the past before he looked at that data to do it more carefully, like what would that be?
I think the main thing would be the slow down. That I was so like hungry to like, oh, I need to finish things quick, right? Because that was my mindset when I first started, was like, when you're very entry level and before data science, I was in operations. So it was a matter of like, how quickly can you get things done? Like how many boxes and tickets can you complete, right? And going to data science is a completely different mindset. It's like, what's the quality and value it can bring? Like if I bring, 10 crappy things, that's going to do nothing compared to like one amazing, like value changing thing, right? And so I brought that old mindset into the job, and that was just the wrong approach. And so being able to slow down and really think through, not just like think through why I'm coding, but like really think through the assumptions, one, saves a lot of time in the long run, but also like I have this document that's used as an asset to like kind of save my ass, but also like I really don't need to save my ass because I thought through it so much, and the stakeholder feels comfortable because I put in so much effort up front.
Mark, thank you very much. Before we move on to the next question, just a couple of comments here from Russell. Russell says, rule number 1, disconnect ego, opinion, and emotion from all considerations in data science. Then Mark followed up with strong held assumptions and gut feelings. How dare you? Russell also says here that it can be mortifyingly painful to present inaccurate data, but owning the responsibility for the mistake and the corrective action, plus making sure all stakeholders know when the correction is implemented, can go a long way to regaining any lost trust. Russell, thank you so much for sharing that. Also, shout out to Shantana is in the building. Shantana, Dr. Dooley, thank you so much for coming back. Good to see you again. Also, shout out to Christine and Ellen. Good to see you guys here. If you guys have any questions, please let us know. If you guys got questions in here in general, let me know. Just drop it right there in the chat or send me a private message on LinkedIn. If you guys have questions, watch on LinkedIn, please let us know as well. I'm happy to take your questions. Let's go to Matt Diamond's question next.
Hey guys, so thanks, Harp. And the question I have is how to get people who have used Excel for decades with a lot of vested interest in the tool. It's familiar interface. I mean, they're comfortable with it, but it just doesn't do the job that I need it to do, and I'd say my organization needs it to do. But there's such a lack of familiarity with the ins and outs of data science that I'm stuck in a hard place getting people to taking the horse to water, proverbially, but getting him to drink has been a challenge. I can imagine that someone here has faced something like that. I'd love to learn how to get people to understand what Jupyter can do and the types of data viz it can pull off without overly intimidating people into writing code in Jupyter notebooks. Again, anything along those lines would be super helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I'll start off with Vin for this question, and after Vin, go to Mark. But just one tool right off the bat that might be worth looking into is NAS.ai, Notebook as a Service.ai. That's Jeremy Revenall's project, and it's meant as a way to just make it really easy to communicate what you're trying to communicate to non-technical people. So that's a tool worth checking out. Jeremy, thanks for creating that awesome tool. I also know Jeremy just had a baby a couple weeks ago, so congrats to you, Jeremy. Let's go to Vin Vashista, then we'll go to Mark, and then if anybody else wants to jump in here, Serge, Vivian, Eric, Jennifer, anyone, just let me know. Just like raise the hand on the reaction thing, and I'll add you to the queue.
Excel's kind of like a cult. So you're in a really, really tough spot. Like the normal generic advice that I give doesn't work for some stuff. Like Excel's one of those niche areas. It's like trying to get somebody that codes in C++ to acknowledge other languages exist, because it truly is. There's like this cultish devotion to it. And so that's really what you have to do, is somehow get the people out of that cult mindset. It's not so much like they're scared of other tools. It's that they love Excel so much that there's this irrationality around it. And, you know, it almost doesn't matter how cool the alternative is that you show them. You know, they really have to have some sort of crazy, huge pain to break out of that group think.
Yeah, I mean, the pain is it's survival. I'd argue. I mean, the industry is not going to be competitive. I mean, our position in the industry will not be competitive because there are other firms using Matplotlib and getting better results from it. But there seems to be, I don't know if it's as much of I mean, it's a sense of fear and a clinging to it. It's just trying to show that there is an alternative out there, but there just hasn't been an infrastructure put in place, and there hasn't been a user-friendly explanation of what it can do without delving into the technical details, which is fine. I'm happy to be that ambassador, but getting there it's more of a behavioral science than anything. I would imagine. I'm completely empathetic to that, but I'm sure there are things that I don't know, and I'd love to hear what other people have done. And this is super helpful, man.
Yeah, it's basic deprogramming. Okay. And that's the first piece of deprogramming is you can't call out the person who's stuck in the cult for being wrong or stupid or crazy or anything like that. You almost have to just be there and go, no, Excel is amazing, but and you get enough of those knows, and you open up enough opportunities for conversation, someone is finally going to walk through that door. But the problem is you want it to happen fast, and it doesn't. The way that it feels like you're going to get fast results is to show how wrong and how lacking and how bad Excel is. And you can't really do it. They have to come to their own pain.
Yeah.
They have to see it. And all you can do is kind of provide evidence and facts to support using Jupyter, or, if you can find some intermediary, some like gateway tool that'll get you there. That's another good technique. But like I said, this is really Excel's cult-like, and you have to deprogram people. And that's, and that's really step one, is just starting conversations where they can ask some questions and not feel like Excel's terrible, but feel like maybe there's something that can get bolted on top of Excel. And then you rapidly wean them off of, what's going to continually pull them back. And that's the other problem with Excel, is it gets you so comfortable that if you ever get out of your comfort zone in a notebook, it's like 15 seconds, you're back to Excel. And no matter how many hours it takes you to do something that would take you 10 minutes of Googling to figure out, they'll go right back.
Yeah. I mean, luckily I'm in a position where if my team just starts running over with Jupyter Notebook and using data science day in and day out, where we're absolutely crushing other teams and other organizations. As callous as this sounds, I'm willing to let those who want to cling to Excel and through their convictions. I want to be part of the solution and not part of the problem in my organization. And thankfully I've found like-minded people who are willing to support the effort. I just know that I'm going to face a ton of resistance along the way, but anything to handicap that is super helpful. So thanks for voicing this, Ben. It's going to mentally handicap things.
Only Dave Langer was here to hear all this. I wonder what Dave Langer would say. Dave, if you're listening, this is the opportunity to come in.
Hit me up on LinkedIn, Dave.
Stick up for Excel. Let's go to Mark after this. Let's go to Mark, then after Mark, we'll go to Russell and Serge. By the way, can we just acknowledge how cool that silver streak of hair in Vin's hair is right there? That is amazing. I wish I had that going on. Instead, I'm going bald. Let's go to Mark, and then after Mark, we'll go to Russell and then Serge.
So I have not implemented this, so take that with a grain of salt. I'm more so pulling different contextual things and bringing it together to brainstorm with you. So I just want to caveat with that. But again, I talk about this all the time. I talk about the STARS framework, and I post a link from an HBR article that goes into it. But specifically, STARS stands for startup, turnaround, accelerated growth, realignment, and sustained success. And specifically, you're in realignment based on what I'm hearing, is that you've had some success, it's growing, there's like set in their ways, but you see there's not a problem today, but there would definitely be a big problem in the future if you maintain this. And so you need to realign the ship, right? And so that requires a different set of strategy and influence as compared to like, if the ship was going down and burning, they'll be like, oh yeah, whatever's a great idea, like we need to fix something now. Right. But things are working now, so you need to really figure out a way to influence to make that happen. And for me, the way I think about it is, within an organization, thinking about like entrepreneurship, innovating within your organization, is I view myself as a startup of one. Maybe I'm a team as a startup within this, and all my colleagues are my market, and I'm trying to capture this market and sell to them. And so for me, my mindset would be like, if I was in a situation, I'm like, okay, who are the champions? Who are the key people that are going to like, do I need to influence and get them on the team on board for them to influence other people, right? So instead of me trying to be like, let me convince everyone, right? I want to go identify, well, who's going to have the most like power to make a decision to like convince people, be like, actually, this is our new OKR. We're using Jupyter Notebooks for like 30% of our project, something like that, right? And so my effort would be focused on like, who are those key people to sell to? And then again, thinking about selling is, you want to focus on what's the problem that's being solved for them and how your proposed solution fills that need so perfectly for them. And so it's less about like, well, don't you obviously see this is way better than Excel? You need to understand their pain points and really deeply understand like, okay, they really love Excel, but when talking to them, say like, well, what doesn't work for you for Excel sometimes? What's something that's taking really long that you can really try to try to accelerate, right? So for example, I'm thinking top of my head, if you're ever working with Excel data and maybe you have like, I know you work in finance. I don't know any finance things, but like, say for instance, it's like,
as we'd say, pricing data in Excel. We could find a web scraping tool, and we could write a Python script, automate a pricing check 4 times a month, as opposed to getting some Excel monkey to manually check a web page, manually put the pricing data into Excel, and having that file stored locally. Like that's what I'm dealing with.
So I would argue think even simpler at first, because again, like you're already at the promised land, right? You already see it, but other people don't see it, right? Mm-hmm. And so like for me, like what I'm thinking about is like something as simple as like when you have like text data. So say for instance, like organization name, and you have this whole Excel file. It's so painful to manually clean that throughout that. And so you can say like, hey, you know, you're totally using Excel. You fixed that column. It took you like 3 hours. What if I showed you a way to do it, this one cell in notebook, that'll take you like 2 minutes, right? Well, maybe take you longer to code it, but to run it, it'll take you a few minutes, right?
Right.
And then you're like, well, also I can show you how to download into CSV so you can put it back into Excel,
Bingo.
right?
Yeah.
And so like you solve this one pain point and you get them hooked. And from there, you can build from there. Again, just brainstorming, but like that's the framework I'm thinking about of like, how do I navigate and like get something adopted? I feel like Greg would probably have great insights too on like how to get something adopted.
Yeah, Greg, I see your chat, and guys, I'm all responding in the chat. This is all super helpful, guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's go to Russell and then Serge. By the way, if anybody else has questions, please do let me know either in the comment section on LinkedIn, on YouTube. If you're in the chat here, let me know if you got questions. And also shout out Christine, Ellen, Shantan. I see you guys here. Good to see you. Let me know if you guys got questions. Russell, go for it.
Evening all. So Excel, yeah, I think one of the main things to say about Excel is it's been the main tool on the market for some 30 plus years. So it's almost ubiquitous throughout most organizations, general organizations, not data science. So everybody's had it normally bundled on their laptop, so it's been there for you. So everyone's had to play with it. So it's really kind of ingrained as a first line of defense for anything. So I think that's why it's almost a comfort blanket for people. The way I approach trying to wean people away from Excel is to point out its weaknesses, because it has some strengths. And again, as you said, Harpreet, it'd be nice if Dave Langer was here to be able to really go on about those. But the weaknesses, as I see them, are stability and fidelity of data in it, and a propensity for breaking or corruption and fragmenting. Okay, so recent enterprise Office 365 has helped, so you can have a single version saved on SharePoint and share it, rather than having a version of a file that's then copied, saved as, and emailed around 100 times, so you end up with 100 different versions of the same file, and version history is very difficult to work out. So if we assume that most of the people you're talking to have got that enterprise level, so that they can share a single file, the weaknesses are still, even if you protect that file, it's still open to having inadvertently protected cells overwritten, because Excel's not very good at keeping a protected cell protected. I don't know if you guys are experts on Excel, but if you have a protected column and you do an array paste that goes from either side of that column, it'll actually paste over a protected cell. So it's really irritating in that way. So try to point out the weaknesses of it, and then really upsell the complementary strengths of whatever you want to propose as a solution. So be that, say, and again, if Dave Langer was here, he'd talk about R as being able to do some of that and push it back out to Excel. Python can do the same thing. I do a lot of work also with Power BI, which is kind of a successor to Excel, at least from the Power Pivot and Power Query, plus other stuff. So I try to wean people off Excel to the next best solution that still has a tangible connection to it, and try and move them off. Try, as I say, wean them in time. Don't just cold circuit them. Don't say, right, Excel's rubbish, you need to do this now. Let them find the better solutions, and coach them to move away from it rather than order them to move away from it. And even then, I think, as Vin was saying, it's a comfort blanket. As soon as something doesn't work the way you want to, you go straight back to Excel. And one of the most common questions I get from people that are not really comfortable with non-Excel solutions is, oh yeah, that data output, that's amazing. How did you do that? Can I export that to Excel and have a play with it? Yeah. So it's Excel is just such a hard habit to break. I don't think you're going to do it in days or weeks or even months. It's going to take a long, long time. But just keep pushing those iterative improvements, and eventually we can move away. But try and sell them as a supplement to Excel rather than a replacement to Excel.
Helpful.
There's just a certain bit of satisfaction you get like when you're actually like manipulating the data yourself. Like it's one thing to look at it in a static data frame where you can't really, get down and dirty with it. So I could see where some people are reluctant to get rid of it, to have a play with that.
The cynic in me, Harpreet, most people want the data exported to Excel. So if they don't like a number or if they disagree with a number, they can just overwrite the number. That's what you don't want in data. Yeah. That's the whole reason to move away. But that's the reason people want it. Oh, I can't show my manager that number. Let me just change it. That goes on more than I think anyone would care to admit. And that's the biggest reason to move away from Excel.
Thank you very much, Russell. So let's go to Serge next, and then Kostub and Eric. If you guys want to talk on this topic, we'll go to Kostub and then Eric next, and after that, we'll jump into Greg's question. You are muted, Serge.
I keep doing that. Russell just hit the nail on the head. I was going to talk about that a bit more, but yeah, he beat me to it. Yeah, like I think the gateway drug to something better than Excel is definitely BI tools. So as soon as they see what you can do with BI tools like Power BI or like Tableau, they won't want to use Excel. Plus, it will allow them to use even more data that they can already if they haven't reached that limitation. Better plots, nicer looking too, and it has a cleaner user interface. Although they might feel a bit lost without that kind of sheet first approach. They also, you could point them to Alteryx or something like that as well. They might like the kind of pipelines and all that, and thinking about data in that way is also a healthier way to look at it, as in sheets. I think it's very limiting. So yeah, to me it's like, okay, it's like presenting a 3 or 4 dimensional world in 2 dimensions.
Yeah, it's like flatland.
Yeah, exactly. So that's it. And I think people that live in flatland that you mentioned probably don't know they live in flatland, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my talk about that. All right.
Thank you, Serge. Let's go to Kostub and then Eric. Then after that, we'll jump into Greg's question. By the way, if you're in the room and you have a question, please do let me know, or if you want to contribute to a certain part of the discussion, it's not too late to raise your hand. If you're listening on LinkedIn and you got a question, please do let me know. Also, if you're listening on LinkedIn and you haven't already smashed a like, you should probably do that as well.
Yeah, I just want to turn this question a little bit on its head, kind of partially for devil's advocate reasons, right? Are you trying to solve a problem that isn't your problem to solve? Right? Like, think about it. Now, there are people who've been working with data, with Excel spreadsheets for 20, 30 years, right? They're going through their careers and they've seen all the benefits that they need to see in their day-to-day lives. Is your job there to transform the whole business to getting it to using Python? Or, I mean, is that a problem you necessarily need to solve now?
It's akin to asking, is it my responsibility to take the frog out of boiling water before he realizes that it's boiling? For my team, for my specific department, I'd argue yes. For the rest of my organization, absolutely not.
Right, but my point is, like, do you think that just by doing it within your team and showing the results, that over time, and this might be potentially over a few years, right?
Yeah.
Other parts of the organization would come along the story by seeing those wins.
Potentially, but that's that's a prerogative that the rest of the organization has. One, temporally, I don't think I'll be here in 3 years. I'll just freely admit that, but I do want to showcase the benefit of what can be done outside of Excel and with the benefits that everybody here sees day in and day out. Because it really is an existential crisis. The industry needs to move. It just doesn't know how to move. And I like to think that I could propose how it can move in a way that is beneficial to itself and to its clients. Because other organizations are doing this, our competitors are doing this. We just don't happen to see what exactly they're doing. And I'm in a position where I can see that. But I just want my team to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. Whether the organization decides to adopt our practices, that's up to it. But I don't want my own trajectory and my standing to lose because of behavioral inertia and a close fidelity to Excel. Like that's just ridiculous, in my view. So that's the long-winded answer to the question.
Yeah, I mean, like to my mind, it's very much in your case. It sounds like that is kind of your job to make sure that pushes through. I think a lot of the time I've fallen into this trap before where I've gotten so almost on a high horse, right, to say, hey, this is the better way to do something, that I waste a lot of time trying to convince people that it's a better way to do something and not enough time focusing on the job at hand. So that's the only reason I asked that question.
No, and you're exactly right. I think there's a principal agent problem that could develop here. What I'm trying to eliminate that possibility by, I'll just say it, unfucking what's been fucked up for a long time. And so I'm trying to anticipate what that problem could be and eliminate it before it becomes a problem.
Thank you very much. Great comments, Costa. Thank you, Matt. Let's go to Eric on this topic, and then Serge. Is your hand up as well, or is that by accident? If it's by accident, But
yeah.
All right, cool. Let's go to Eric on this topic. Then after Eric, we will go to next question.
So obviously, I don't have a ton to add on what everybody else has said, but so in a previous job, pre-data stuff, I was I guess you could call me a kind of a process improvement leader. And my job was to pull together cross-functional teams from different parts of the company to fix problems that needed to be fixed in like an intensive, like blitz, like to use a Lean or Six Sigma term, right? It was a blitz. And so I did not know anything about the problems, and I didn't even know what problems existed to start with. And my job, the big part of my job, even though I had some tools that could be used to fix things, I spent most of my time like sitting down with people who knew what the problems were, asking them about the problems, and they would just tell me what they didn't like. And it's like Paul Akers says, fix what bugs you. And everybody has something that they don't like. And that's where you could start with stuff. But you don't know what those people don't like until they tell you what they don't like. And when you find that thing they don't like, or they tell you, you'll get all the input that you could possibly need for it. And, maybe some people are comfortable or complacent or whatever, adjective you want to use for that. But somebody somewhere will have a problem that can be solved and that is open to it, and if nobody anywhere has a problem that needs to be solved, well, then fine, I guess you're off the hook. But it doesn't sound like that's the case. And so it just kind of goes back to, I guess, what I said earlier about like thinking like a data scientist, just like ask an absurd number of questions, because eventually you'll get an answer, and that might give you a marching direction, and something to do that will then allow you to meet a need that somebody really wants to have met, and feel like you're all paddling in the same direction.
Thank you very much, Matt. Lots of great tips and advice for you there. This will be re-released on Sunday, so make sure you go back and listen to some of that stuff. Shout out to Richard Smith, just joined us in the room. Also, shout out to Ellen and Christine. If you guys got any questions, let me know. Huge shout out to Shantana. By the way, Shantana is hiring for a machine learning engineer intern. So if you guys are interested in that, go visit her LinkedIn profile to find out more information. Let's go to Greg's question.
Yeah, so forgive me if you've already talked about this one, but I can't help but bring that what you call Zillow conversation here. Um, so I hear so much, oh, it failed, blah blah blah. Let's blame these folks, these data scientists, and we never really know what really happened. I saw an article saying that actually people using the tool, they were actually um, not trusting what the system recommended and kind of changing the numbers, the sales recommend, the buy recommendations to meet their quota. Well, while we're sitting here not knowing the true story, what would you have done differently as a data scientist to make this work, to make it more of a success story than what it is today?
I'm gonna go ahead and shout out Vin for this one because his article Zillow just gave you a look at machine learning's future. It
I know
is
I,
dope.
I like that. I like that. That's why I brought it up. So I want to hear
Yeah,
Vin for
yeah.
sure,
Let's
and
hear from
anybody
Vin.
else.
Yeah, he also made it to the front page of Hacker News with that post. So that's awesome. Vin, yeah, let's hear from you on this.
It's interesting, and I think everybody's kind of tired of hearing my post about Zillow, so I'm not going to wax on too much because I think legit everybody's seen it. Everybody's seen opinions on it. I think the comments that I got on Hacker News are potentially more entertaining than the post itself. And they're informative because you hear, and this is the part that I think hasn't been covered enough. You hear this dichotomy in data science now between what I'm starting to call legacy data science and sort of this new generation of data scientists who are looking at data science as a value generator and a revenue generator. But they're also cautioning that, okay, you're going to start booking cash on this. It has to be more bulletproof, not obviously bulletproof, but it has to be more bulletproof than it used to be in the past. And I don't think we're doing a great job advertising when we hit that barrier between this has a whole lot of safety nets and this, these models have people or processes that are protecting it from itself because models fail. And I don't think we're doing a good job of advertising when those get taken away. And when we start really relying on models for revenue and not just like the models supporting a feature or enabling something, when it's a frontline feature, like Microsoft right now has monetized GPT-3 in 3 different ways. And all of them are the literal hardest ways possible to monetize a model. And they've done the rigorous work necessary to create a product that won't bite them. And they're doing things like Copilot, where they're trialing it and figuring out, where all the rough edges are before they start staking revenue on top of it. They're even selling access to the model itself to retrain it. And so they're doing it really intelligently. And so you can, with large scale models, make money if your data scientists understand that fuzzy line between we've got safety nets and those will protect us. And the other side of that line is we are taking the safety nets away. This has to work a whole lot more reliably. And there's no one in the C-suite who understands how to ask the kind of questions necessary to keep them from really just getting obliterated from a business model standpoint and walking into a setup to fail. And so I think that's the piece that we're missing, is sort of that the branching off of data science, where the legacy side of the field won't support revenue the way companies expect it to. And the newer side of the field, the more rigorous, the more scientifically supported side of the field, it feels like we're not doing a great job of saying, look, this is when we need to start doing hard science, not just analytics anymore. And we're not doing a great job of advertising to senior leadership. Hey, if we don't, this fails. You don't make money, your investors bail. And, we can almost point directly at Zillow and go, yeah, that happens. So if you don't spend the money, if you don't invest the time, that happens. And here's a better description of how this is going to work and how we can support it. And so I think, you can blame data scientists to a point, But you also have to ask the C-suite to be accountable, to know enough about data science, or have somebody in the C-suite, have somebody in the strategy planning process, have someone at the leadership level who understands data science if you're going to create a business model that is completely based on it. That would be like having somebody in charge of Microsoft that didn't understand technology in any way, shape, or form. It just, I mean, sure, maybe, but it sounds like a bad idea to me.
If you're running like a data science organization, like you need to put yourself in a position where you're not fragile to volatility, right? You need to put yourself in a position where you have more to gain than to lose. So you get more upside than downside, right? So you put yourself in a position which requires you to have a ton of information for you to be successful. That's a lot of asymmetry, right? You can't capitalize on that asymmetry. The future is complex. What did was it Babe Ruth or Yogi Bear that says, making predictions is hard, especially about the future, right? So maybe buying houses outright would not have been the right move. Maybe the right move would have been buying options to buy houses, right? I'm sure an options market exists for that. But yeah, I think anytime you're using data science to make, or machine learning to make huge decisions like this is not the same thing as object detection, right? This is not the same thing as trying to say hot dog, not hot dog. This is a completely different use case of machine learning. And in this particular domain, you need more information, right? So make decisions where you need less information to be successful. That's what I would do differently if I was a data scientist. I'd love to hear from Serge on this, if you got any insight, or anybody else for that matter that wants to.
Before Serge, real quick. So if it's true that the people using these models weren't trusting it, it makes any model ever fragile too, right? So if they don't trust what you've put together as a data scientist, especially if it's based on probabilistic, inferences. So in this case, they're gonna go with their gut feeling. Oh, there's no way this house is worth that much. We can purchase it for a little bit lower or a little bit higher, or blah, blah, blah. Let me tinker with it and not trust the system. That's like a recipe for failure too. So it's kind of like, yeah, blame the data scientist, but did you do enough to promote, trust between the ones who are data scientists and the ones who would be using the tools that the data scientists would build? So I think it's a mixture of a lot of things that made this thing fail.
Yeah, just jumping on top of that, there's a behavioral component. And I talked about that a little bit in my article. And this is the part that I think many, many business models are going to fail around, is they pretend that people are rational actors, and they're not. So if you don't have a behavioral model supporting your inference, then you're almost kind of ignoring one dimension of the problem. And Greg just brought up the internal side, which I didn't even bring up, which is it's not just your customers, it's the people inside who are trying to short circuit this. You almost need like another behavioral model to prevent your people from doing all the crazy and stupid things that people who think they're smarter than they are do.
Yeah.
Almost like it needs a bit of responsibility on the data science team to be like, sure, we did well on our training set, sure, we did well on the testing data, but is this an actual good thing for us to try to do? Like, does this project make sense? Should we not have invested that much money? Like, should we have maybe used just a small proportion of capital to test this at least? Like,
Yeah.
One of my colleagues, Drew, has this great saying. I absolutely love it. He's like, "There's no such thing as the test set. The test set is the real world." So, yeah. Anyways, I'll just leave it at that. Costa, go for it. And then after Costa, if Serge wants to jump in,
yeah.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, Harpreet. The question is how much power do you give? How much ownership do you give a data science team to give them the ability to turn around and give senior management that feedback, saying, "Hey, I don't think we're using this model for the right reasons within this business." Right now, that might be in Zillow's case potentially we're not using this model to adequately cover the domain that we need to cover to make the right business decisions. It could be a moral compass, right? Like, one of the things that attracted me to the role I'm at right now is that the company set up like a bit of like an advisory committee, effectively, and it's effectively a voice for the machine learning engineers and the data scientists to turn around and say, hey guys, I don't think we're quite going about this the right way. And having that two-way feedback, I think, is really important. So it's really a cultural thing. Well, there could be a cultural solution to a lot of these problems, I think.
Go for it, Serge.
Yeah, I think there's also a technical solution along the lines of what Harpreet said. Yeah, I think it's all about experimenting. You don't go full on and test it completely. You take a sample size on different markets, see how it behaves. You also you have to be skeptic and see, okay, and realize that your models have a feedback loop and they impact the market and there's people tricking it. So, I mean, it all, I think there's a lot of techniques that have been long existed that are under leveraged, you know, things like, sensitivity analysis, A/B testing, these can be applied to every field. And I think these, whether it was the data scientists, I don't know the particulars of the case, or management, but someone dropped the ball on that.
Thanks so much. Anybody else want to jump in on this? I got a question coming in from LinkedIn from Ben Taylor. We can go to that question next if nobody else has anything to say here.
Thank you for your answers, guys.
I just love that we're talking about this economics and about rationality because, of course, we all know that we underestimate the errors and we overestimate how we know more about a local market, right? And to what Serge was saying, you just get greedy because you haven't properly tested your market and got enough sample size and enough data over a long enough period of time.
Question coming in from Ben Taylor. What is the future of AI explainability? What new tools do you think will be available? It's a great question. I wish Dennis Rothman was here to help with that. Go for it, Greg.
Well, my opinion is that explainability will never be one of those, I'm gonna have access to what's under the hood, right? So GPT-3, who's going to know what's happening with those billions of parameters, right? It's more of a rise of observability, whether it's ML or data observability, that can tell you what changes have happened in the input data and what are the results at the output, and kind of drawing the map of all of that exploration and flagging you to explain to you why this output is changing based on some influences that are happening to the input. To me, explainability is about trying different things with your model and understanding what that model does based on what you feed into it. It's not necessarily understanding what's happening inside that black box. If you want to be a core engineer, you can go in ahead and understand it and build something like it and deep dive into it. But not everybody will want to be there. But everybody wants to have some sort of understanding from explainability standpoint. So the future is around the rise of observability. That's tools that allows observability at scale, because you're going to have hundreds of deployed models out there. You want some sort of scalable automation to help you trigger retraining fast and redeploying fast, because you don't have time to open each hood to understand what's happening.
Thank you so much. We'll go to Serge after this, and then Vin after that, and then Shantanu, if you're around, I'd love to hear from you because we talked about this a little bit on the that one time on my podcast. But I mean, does it make sense to drill this further down when we talk about explainability? Like, does that mean we need to answer the question? Okay, why did this model make this prediction? How did the model make this prediction? And then what does this prediction imply? Like, are those all the same questions? I'm not sure. That's just something that's floating around in my head. But Serge, go for it. And after Serge, Vin, and Shantanu, if you're around, I'd love to hear from you on this.
Well, to expand what Greg said, yeah, I think observability is important. Also, yeah, of course, catching drift, human in the loop. I think for not so much, only for inference, but also for training. Right now, it's pretty manual, but I think when AutoML takes its course, you have to always have human in the loop, and that's where all these tools, to give a constant feedback to the machine learning practitioner, so that things are always, guardrails are placed so that it doesn't do anything crazy. And as you realize what are the weak spots of the model, you place more guardrails in place because you understand that there's data distributions, and there's things that the model cannot learn because they don't exist in the data. They're not represented there. So I think that's where it's heading in that aspect. Also, there's new tools being established with causal ML, things that leverage also counterfactuals. I think that will lead the way to a lot of exciting opportunities.
Speaking of causal inference and counterfactuals, be sure to tune into the episode that I am releasing. I think it is December the 3rd or December the 10th with Dana McKenzie, co-author of the Book of Why. I think you guys will enjoy that conversation. Vin, let's hear from you on this. Anybody else wants to jump in? Please let me know. If anybody else has a question, let me know, because I think we'll begin to wrap it up after this round of discussion.
Yeah, when you said Book of Why and causal inference, the mixtape, get used to it. That's where we're going. Like it's not a new tool. It's a sort of new tool and sort of new applications for it. But the more I look at the regulatory frameworks that are coming out, and I think this is where, when we talk about explainable AI and reliability, robustness, I think we're going to have a couple of drivers. One is adversarial attacks, and eventually you're going to see a significant enough model exploit happen publicly. And that's going to be another, like, I'm going to get another 50,000 views on my Substack for that one. It's going to be another Zillow type event where someone exploits a model publicly with serious financial consequences. And that's going to be one driver that pushes you towards causal. And the other one's going to be regulatory, because the regulators don't understand what they're regulating. So they're over-regulating the heck out of it. They're asking questions that there's just no real way to answer unless you go down a complex rabbit hole that involves some causal. And I don't know which theory of the case is going to end up winning, but at some point we're going to have to start incorporating more hard science, and that's going to be causal inference or causal modeling mechanisms of some sort. We have to. Those two drivers are going to be, it's unavoidable.
Ben, thanks so much. Anybody else want to jump? Oh, Shanthan is around. Shanthan, do you want to jump in here? Just to, in case you didn't hear the question, Ben was asking, what's the future of AI? Not Ben, Ben was asking, what's the future of AI explainability? What new tools do you think will be available?
Yeah, no, I heard the discussion. I'll mention two things. One is that I still think that there is a lot of value in explainable shallow models rather than running to deep models for everything. Having said that, of course, certain fields just don't lend themselves to making a lot of progress without deep neural networks. So that's one. The second is, folks have mentioned drift, model drift. I think specifically, I think what's going to be really important is data governance as well. So, not thinking about particular tools, but part of this ML ops, ML orchestration pipeline has to be data governance, data lineage, data sanity checks, and that will at least help prevent like things going terribly wrong. And sort of the best case scenario, it can be, if you're able to sort of really understand your data, then you can do a lot of this, you can do a lot of explaining from the data. You don't really have to rely on the model too much.
Yeah, I agree with that entire data lineage, data, governance, management, all that stuff. At the end of the day, like, if we're building models, we're just consumers of data. We're like downstream users of data, having all that upstream processes in place is critical. Anybody else want to jump in here? Any last minute questions? Any last minute comments?
Is Ben satisfied with the answers?
Ben, hopefully you're satisfied. I don't see him on the comment section on LinkedIn, but I do know that he is. I think he's headed to the airport, or maybe even sitting at the airport right now. So Ben, hopefully that was interesting to you. So let us know. Come back next week, talk about it. No other questions from anyone. Well, let's wrap it up, guys. Thanks so much for joining. Shout out to everybody that came through. Christine, Jude in the audience. Saw you guys here. Hopefully you guys come back next week. Let me know if you got questions. So episode that released just today, George Faircan, data governance, on the heels of what Shantanu just said. Data governance is important. Well, it's a good thing I got an episode that we talk about data governance. So tune into that. You can also listen to the episode I did with Shantanu as well. So search for that. Next couple weeks, a lot of interesting episodes coming out. Next week is with Steve Cardinale, talk about how to turn ideas into gold. Then after that, Karush Alizada, he has the Philosophy Data Project, which is taking NLP, combining with philosophy. He's got this really interesting web app. We have a good conversation there. Greg, I see you're unmuted. Any last minute questions or comments? Go for it.
That's about it. It's always good to be here.
Awesome, man. Thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you for hanging out. Hope to see you guys next week. And hopefully you guys stay safe, stay warm. Like I mentioned, got like 3 feet of snow today out here in Winnipeg. It is wild. And I got to go try to get groceries right now. Hopefully I can stay on the road. Guys, take care. Have a good rest of the evening, afternoon, whatever it is. Remember, you got one life on this planet. Why not try to do something big? Cheers, everyone.